You have $800,000 in your RRSP and your TFSA is already maxed. You've heard it 100 times. Withdraw from your RRSP in low-income years and park it in your TFSA, smart move. Except that math only works if you actually have room. If your TFSA is full, that money has to go somewhere else. And somewhere else is a taxable account where CRA takes a cut every single year. I used to believe the RRSP to TFSA move was always the gold standard. Then I ran the numbers on my own situation, realized my TFSA was full, and saw that I was about to create a tax problem I'd never planned for. That wake-up call changed how I think about withdrawals entirely. Here's the number nobody shows you. Over 10 years, that extra tax drag on a non-registered account could cost you more than $50,000 of your retirement income. Not because you made a bad investment, because the money landed in the wrong account, and the strategy that works beautifully when you have TFSA room can quietly backfire when you don't. In this video, I'll walk through 7 strategies to take money out of your RRSP and RRIF without handing it all to CRA. Strategy number 4 is the one most people haven't heard. It's the real playbook for when your TFSA is full. But first, let's talk about the trap most people don't even see coming. If you're a Canadian retiree who wants to keep that $50,000 in your pocket, hit subscribe now. This channel is built for people who saved hard and plan to keep more of what they earned. Here's what actually happens when you withdraw from your RRSP and your TFSA is already maxed. You take out $50,000. After roughly 30% in federal and provincial tax, you're left with about $35,000. Now you have to put that somewhere. If it goes into a high-interest savings account, earning 4%, that's $1,400 in interest income. Tax on that, at a 40% marginal rate, is $560 a year. Do that for 10 years, and you've quietly paid over $5,600 in extra tax on money that's already been taxed once. That number compounds. And it's not the only way this plays out. Here's where most people make the wrong assumption. They treat non-registered accounts as one thing, a taxable bucket, equally bad no matter what's in it. But that's not how Canadian tax law works. What you hold in a non-registered account matters just as much as the fact that you hold it there. Interest income, savings accounts, GICs, bond funds gets taxed at your full marginal rate, but eligible Canadian dividends get something different, the dividend tax credit. For a retiree in a moderate income bracket, that can bring the effective tax rate on those dividends down to roughly 15 to 20%. That's not a loophole. That's how the system is designed. So if your TFSA is full and you're pulling money out of your RRSP, the question isn't whether to put it in a non-registered account. It's what you put in that account. Holding high-interest savings instruments there is the most expensive choice. Holding Canadian dividend-paying investments there, blue-chip stocks, Canadian equity funds, gives you meaningfully lower ongoing tax drag. This is the strategy almost nobody talks about when they discuss RRSP withdrawals. They focus entirely on the tax you pay when you take the money out, and completely ignore the tax you keep paying on whatever it earns afterward. And here's the thing that makes this even more critical. The OAS clawback threshold in 2026 is $95,323. Once your net income crosses that line, CRA starts clawing back 15 cents of every OAS dollar above it. A poorly structured, non-registered account, full of interest income, can push you over that threshold faster than you expect. So before we talk about the 7 strategies themselves, understand the frame. The goal is not just to minimize tax when you withdraw. It's to minimize tax on every dollar every year for the rest of your retirement. That $5,600 in extra tax is real, but it's only the start. What if I told you that waiting too long to withdraw, especially past age 71, can force you into an even bigger tax bill? Let's talk about the deadline. You don't get to keep your RRSP forever. By December 31 of the year you turn 71, it has to be converted into a RRIF, and the moment that happens, CRA takes over part of the schedule. You no longer decide how much to withdraw each year. There's a minimum, and it goes up with age. At age 72, that minimum is 5.4% of your RRIF balance from the prior December 31. On a $1 million RRIF, that's a mandatory withdrawal of $54,000. Add CPP at $15,500 a year and OAS at $8,500. And you're already looking at $78,000 in income before you've made a single choice about your own money. That's fine if your balance is $1 million. But plenty of Canadians retire with significantly more. And once the balance grows or the percentages climb with age, that forced income can push you over the OAS clawback threshold at $95,323. Every dollar above that line costs you 15 cents of your OAS payment. I remember working through a plan for a client. He was 70, and he'd built up a $1,200,000 RRIF. We had always told him to hold off on withdrawals, let it grow. Then I ran the numbers for what age 72 looked like. The forced withdrawal alone, on top of his CPP and OAS, put him $25,000 over the clawback line. Over a decade, that was roughly $20,000 in OAS he'd never see. I felt like we'd missed something obvious. What we missed was this: the time to start drawing down the RRSP is not when CRA forces you to. It's in your early to mid-60s, when your income is lower, your tax bracket is manageable, and you still have control over the pace. The forced RRIF minimum isn't a strategy. It's a default, and defaulting to it without a withdrawal plan is one of the most common and most expensive mistakes in Canadian retirement. Now, if you're single, those forced withdrawals hit even harder because you can't split the income with a spouse. So what options do you actually have? Let's look at strategies built specifically for single retirees. If you're single, the standard playbook doesn't fully apply to you. Income splitting, where couples shift income between spouses to lower their combined tax, isn't available. The spousal RRSP rollover at death that lets a surviving spouse defer tax, also not there. You're working with a different set of tools, and most of the advice you find online isn't written with you in mind. I know that can feel frustrating. You saved the same way, you've done the same work, and now you're being told you can't split income. That's real. But you're not out of options. You just need a different approach. Here's what the math looks like if you let your RRSP grow unchecked. Say your total income in retirement, RRIF withdrawals, CPP, OAS, adds up to $120,000. Income above the $95,323 OAS clawback threshold is $24,677. At 15%, that's $3,702 in OAS you lose every single year. Over 10 years, that's $37,000 gone, not because you made a mistake, but because you didn't draw down early enough. The first lever for single retirees is the same one everyone should use, but it matters more when you're on your own. Start withdrawing from your RRSP in your early 60s, before you've started CPP and OAS. When your income is at its lowest, you pay tax at a lower rate, you reduce the balance, and you reduce what CRA will eventually force you to withdraw. The second lever is something few people plan for, but it's worth knowing. If you have a large RRSP and you're charitably inclined, you can name a charity as a beneficiary of your RRSP or RRIF. Your estate receives a donation receipt for the full value, which can offset the tax owing on that amount, up to 75% of your net income in the year of death. It doesn't help you in retirement, but it can dramatically reduce the tax bill your estate faces. The third lever brings us back to asset location. A single retiree drawing down an RRSP into a non-registered account needs to be intentional about what goes in that account. Canadian dividend income, taxed at 15 to 20% effective, not interest income at 40%. The account is taxable, but you control how taxable. One of those options is the RSP meltdown strategy, borrowing to invest while drawing down your RRSP. It sounds clever, but it's riskier than most advisors admit. Let's look at it closely. Here's a strategy that sounds smart and often is, but carries a trap that can cost you more than it saves. If you convert your RRSP to a RRIF before age 65, you can access pension income splitting. You and your spouse split the RRIF income on your tax returns, lowering both of your marginal rates. The math looks great on paper, but converting early means one thing: you've started the mandatory withdrawal clock. You no longer have the option to delay, and starting minimum withdrawals 5 or 6 years earlier than you'd planned, at 65 instead of 71, means more taxable income for more years during what might have been your lowest income window. I had a client who did exactly this. She converted at 65, took the pension income split, and it worked beautifully for the first few years. Then at 72, her RRIF withdrawal, now much larger because the balance had kept growing, combined with her CPP, pushed her above the OAS clawback threshold. We had to restructure. It cost her $8,000 in extra tax over 3 years before we got it sorted out. Income splitting looked like a win. In her case, it wasn't. The hidden cost is this: pension income splitting reduces your tax rate now. But if it means your RRIF balance is larger at 72 because you started withdrawals late, or if triggering RRIF status early pushes you over $95,323, the savings disappear and then some. This is where the TFSA full solution comes in, and it's the core of what makes this approach different. If your TFSA is full and you want to reduce your RRSP balance in your 60s, you don't need to force a RRIF conversion to do it. You can make voluntary RRSP withdrawals directly, paying tax on them, yes, but at a rate you control, and place that money into a non-registered account with Canadian dividend-paying investments. Effective tax on those dividends: roughly 15 to 20% going forward. No mandatory minimums, no early clock, full flexibility. You've just eliminated the forced RRIF size problem, kept control of your withdrawal pace, and positioned the non-registered money for lower ongoing tax. That's 3 wins from 1 decision. Now let's talk about a strategy that tries to do something even more aggressive with this: borrowing to invest while drawing down your RRSP. It has a name, the RSP meltdown, and it deserves a harder look than most advisors give it. The RSP meltdown is one of those strategies that looks elegant when you draw it on a whiteboard. The idea: you take out a loan, invest the borrowed money in a non-registered account with income-producing investments, and use your RRSP withdrawals to pay the loan interest. The interest is tax-deductible because the borrowed money is used to earn income. Meanwhile, your RRSP balance shrinks on a schedule you control, and the non-registered portfolio grows. On paper, it does several things at once: reduces RRSP, generates a tax deduction, builds a non-registered account with favorable asset location. When market conditions cooperate, it works. When they don't, it hurts. Here's the scenario most people don't think through until they're in it. The market drops 20%. The non-registered portfolio is down, but the loan doesn't care. The interest is still due every month. So you're pulling money out of your RRSP to cover the interest on borrowed funds that are now worth less than when you started. Your RRSP balance is falling during a downturn, which means it has less to recover from when the market comes back. And you can't just stop the withdrawals. You've committed to the loan. The meltdown strategy requires a specific kind of investor, someone with a stable cash flow safety net outside the RRSP, a high tolerance for volatility, and the patience to let the strategy play out over many years. It's not for someone who's already relying on their RRSP as their primary retirement income source. It can work. But walk through the downside scenario before you walk through the upside one. If that level of complexity and leverage doesn't suit you, The next strategy is simpler and more powerful for many Canadians, delaying CPP and OAS. But only if your health supports it. If you delay CPP past age 65, it grows by 0.7% for every month you wait, up to 42% more at age 70. OAS grows by 0.6% per month, up to 36% more at 70. Those are meaningful numbers, and the strategy for people with a large RRSP is this. Draw from your RRSP in your mid to late 60s to cover your living expenses, keep CPP and OAS on pause, and let those government benefits grow. When you do take them, at 70 they're larger, and your RRSP is smaller, which lowers your future forced RRIF income. Two problems solved at once. But this only works if you live long enough to pass the break-even point. For CPP, that's generally around age 78 to 80, depending on your individual situation. Before that point, you'd have been better off taking it earlier. After it, you're ahead, and for every year past break-even, the advantage grows. I still think about my dad turning 60 and saying he wanted CPP now, while he was healthy and could enjoy it. He lived to 86. If he'd waited to 70, the math would have put him ahead by something close to $100,000 over those years. But he couldn't know that at 60. Nobody can. That's what makes this decision personal. It's not just math. It's a read on your own health, your family history, and your comfort with uncertainty. If you're in good health with a family history of longevity, and you have enough RRSP room to fund the gap years, delaying makes real financial sense. If your health picture is uncertain, taking benefits earlier and having that money in hand is a completely rational choice. All 7 strategies work, but none of them work in isolation. Let's bring it together. 7 strategies. One common thread. Control when you pay tax and control what your money earns after it leaves the RRSP. Know your TFSA room before you plan any withdrawal. If it's full, a non-registered account with Canadian dividend-paying investments is your next best vehicle, not a savings account, not GICs. Start drawing from your RRSP in your early 60s, before CPP and OAS begin, when your income is at its lowest. If you're in good health, delay CPP and OAS and let those benefits grow. If you're in a couple, use pension income splitting carefully, not as a reason to trigger early RRIF conversion. If you have a large RRSP and you're charitably inclined, a beneficiary designation can eliminate a major tax bill at death. And above all, don't wait for CRA to set your withdrawal schedule. The forced RRIF minimum is a default, not a plan. The Canadians who keep the most of what they saved are not the ones who earned the most. They're the ones who had a plan for getting the money out. If you want to keep building that plan, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm Brian, and every week I help Canadians like you build a tax-smart retirement they can actually live on. See you in the next video. You earned that money. Now keep it.